I would like to cover with you the do's and don't of Asana. And someone asked me this on the forum. Based on your experience with Asana, what would you say are the biggest do's, so things to do, and the biggest don't, which is things you shouldn't do when using Asana? I want to share 4 of each in this video. So let's start with the do's when it comes to Asana. Whatever plan you have, this is going to be interesting for you. The 4 ones I want to cover is the inbox, the My Tasks view, the project templates, which are available with the free, the first paid plan, and get help. And then I will cover the don't, which is about the subtasks, throwing tasks at people, expect a project to be set up easily, and I will dig into this later on, and expect Asana to do everything. Let's start with the do's. The inbox is very, very important. If you look at this inbox right there, this is basically where you're going to see everything related to the work you follow. It's very important to learn how to use the inbox properly. I'm going to spend some time on this because I think it's very important to master this specific view. Combined with My Tasks, this is where you're going to be spending, I would say, 95% of your day, unless you're not using Asana correctly. So let's dive right in. The inbox will show you notifications about things you follow, things that impact you. Usually, most of the notifications will come from tasks on which you are a collaborator. So if you look at this task, for example, I'm a collaborator at the bottom. So I'm Michelle on this task. I'm a collaborator right there. And I get notified because of comments being posted here, either by my colleagues or by Asana rules or by third-party apps, whatever the reason might be. Any comment posted, I will be notified. I have the ability to leave the task, and that's something that's important. If you get notified too much, you might want to take a second look at this bottom right corner, because that might mean that you are actually following a task you shouldn't follow that closely. And maybe you can let your team know that you left the task and they need to bring you back in if they need something. As a reminder, the only way to bring the 2 ways to bring someone back is to add them as collaborators. I'll show you within a project. So this is a demo space, and you've seen this in some of the other videos we're doing. So this is a demo space. If you look at a task at the bottom, you can see the collaborators. So there are 2 ways to bring new people in. You have the add collaborator button right there. You can type someone's name like Lauren, or you can also add mention. So use the add key, you start typing someone's name and they pop up and you select the name. That means the comment I'm going to post right there will notify that person as well as adding them as collaborators. So that means moving forward, they will be notified of new comments. That's where most of your notification will come. In some cases, if you are the ones to set up an entire project or set up a project template, you might actually be a collaborator on those tasks, and maybe it doesn't make sense. So make sure to analyze every single notification that goes through the inbox. Maybe some of those don't make sense. Maybe you don't want them from the start. If that's the case, you should investigate as to why you are receiving those notifications, because it shouldn't be the case. So either look at the project template that was used or look at the entire process that led to that moment. Because sometimes a task goes from one stage to the other and you get added at one specific stage, but maybe it doesn't make sense once you hand over your work to other people. Maybe it doesn't make sense to stay there. So maybe this is something that could be done through automation as well as removing you from those tasks. Also, one thing that's very important is to go into the settings of your account and go into notifications. This is very important. For example, this one, the project notifications, that's super important. By default, you get notified about 3 things: status updates on project, messages within projects, which is not comments, and tasks added to project. The first 2 that's a good thing. That's the way it's supposed to be used. Being notified of status updates, that's good, and messages are usually not used by anyone or not many users, so you should be fine if you keep that on. However, tasks added is not a good thing. You shouldn't be notified about new tasks being added, at least in most cases. So my advice would be to disable this default behavior and then just enable it on a case-per-case basis. Just so you know, if you turn that off right now, you might still have project for which it is turned on. So go into the manage individual project and then tick those boxes if it makes sense. All right, so that one is very important. And you might want to check as well the email notification. Not everything here applies to the inbox, but make sure that you have the right setup anyway. For example, no email is to me the best option you can pick, because you really don't want to get emails from Asana. You want everything within the inbox. And as of today, we already know that there are a few more options that are coming for the inbox. So it's going to get better. It's going to get easier to manage. Going back to the inbox, every single thing you deal with has to be archived. That's very important. I know it's hard. I know it's a struggle, but that's the only way to stay in touch and close to your inbox. If you don't archive, you're just going to have a long stream of notifications with no easy way to know when you stopped. So really, please take that extra energy to archive things you've read. You either use the archive button or you use the letter E on your keyboard. That allows you to go through everything. It's really important. It's the key to using Asana properly. Do not use the inbox as a to-do list. If a message, if a notification in the inbox tells you to do something, there should be a task. Either the actual task you are commenting on should be assigned to you, or you should create a new one. A notification is not an action. You shouldn't keep it around if you have stuff to do. If you want to read it later, you can bookmark. It goes into bookmarks, or you can create a task for yourself, like a follow-up task or a subtask. Again, it's very important. Do not use the inbox as a secondary to-do list. Otherwise, it's going to be a struggle. You can use the filters if you want. Just make sure when you toggle them on to toggle them off from time to time to really see everything that's in the inbox. You can sort by whatever you want. I usually sort by newest. You can try the relevance engine and see if it makes sense for you. And also 2 things regarding the 3-dot menu. Make sure to expand notifications. You want to see everything that's new within that main thread. You don't want to have to open the notifications to see the details. So make sure it's expanded by default. And I hope Asana will expand this by default one day. I keep telling them. And also, if you are watching me right now and if you feel like you want to use the inbox for real, you want to be real with the inbox, maybe just archive everything. Archive everything, especially if you've read all your emails, just archive everything. That's fine. And then start fresh and have a clear state of mind and try to archive everything you read. That's the inbox. Very important. Archive everything you can. If you make a mistake, if you want to go back to something, you can use the archive button right there to go back to the archive. That's going to change the way you use Asana completely. Okay, so we looked at the inbox. That's it. My task, almost as important as the inbox. This is really where you're going to spend your day working, because this is where all your tasks are coming together. Super important. If you're not using My Tasks, you are completely losing the point of Asana. You're missing out on most of the value that tool brings. Let's go to My Tasks. There's a ton of things to say about My Tasks. It shows everything assigned to you by default. That means one thing that's very important. Things and tasks have to be assigned to you in order to be very explicit about who's doing the work. Telling someone, for example, please do this as a comment doesn't work, because they don't get a task to represent that piece of work unless you then go on and assign the task to them. If 2 people have to do exactly the same thing, it's 2 different tasks. It's not one task, because they need to be able to see that task within the My Task view. Why is it important? The reason is you want a single list of all the things you have to do from all the different projects, because you want to be able to clean that list, order that list, put that in the right order that you wish to tackle things on. A couple of ways to use the My Task view. First, make sure to filter for incomplete tasks only. There's absolutely no reason to see things you've done already. That should be the default. Then there's basically 2 major ways to use My Tasks. The first one is to group by due date. That's the one we have on the screen. Asana will create sections specifically based on the date. Today, tomorrow, next 30 days. You can't decide the groups. Asana does decide the groups, but it's an easy way to see things in the right order in terms of due date. However, be careful. Not everything has a date. and the date is only part of the picture. Sometimes the priority is more important than the date. So keep that in mind. For example, if you got the bottom, you're going to see things without a due date. So those things without a due date, they might completely fall through the cracks if you're using the group by due date. I'm fine with it. I don't think that's the best way to use Asana, but sometimes going back to this grouping might help, especially if you want to catch up on old overdue work. But make sure if you use that view, that grouping, to go at the bottom of the list to see what doesn't have a due date. Not everything needs to have a due date, but sometimes if you want it to rise up, you can put a due date. That's okay. Also, in addition to the grouping, you can decide on a different sort, especially if you have a big section. You might want to sort by a specific priority, for example. The one I like, the one that I think is the most powerful way to use Asana, is to group by custom sections. That's the one, sections. Those sections are created by Asana initially, and then you can change them completely. For example, they are usually recently assigned today, upcoming, later. The wording does change depending on when you started to use Asana. I use this, it's amazing. I changed the section. I have meetings at the top, then recently assigned, then I have must, should, and could as sections. This is a system that works well for me. You need to find your own system. I think I'm currently using the seventh version of my system because I keep changing and improving the system, but it works well for me. This one you have on the screen is a good one. It works well in most cases, and it's a good way to start using Asana properly. Recently assigned is a specific section into which tasks will go. Then today, this week, and do later, it's up to you to organize it however you want. And it's actually pretty interesting to see that something that is due next week might sit in a section called today. It's perfectly fine. Today is not about the due date, it's about the when you want to work on something. And as I said earlier, the due date is only part of the picture, because the order you want to apply needs to take into account the due date as well as the priority, the project they belong to, whoever assigned the task to you. There are lots of things to take into account. The due date obviously is important, and usually you try to avoid having overdue tasks, but that might happen and that might be okay. That might be the reason why you might have some overdue stuff within due this week, and you might have some stuff for next week within the today section. That's also the reason why in my case I'm using must, should, and could as sections instead of today, upcoming, and later. The idea is to get things, actually things will arrive in recently assigned by default, and then you triage them manually into the right sections. I know it's a bit of work, but that's the only way for you to check in and check each task individually and place them in the right bucket. It's very important, because sometimes something comes in and you realize it's actually not for you, or you might want to delegate that thing. You want to do this right away. You don't want to delegate on the due date because it's too late. So that's why you have to go through that triage strategy. That's very important. One thing that's also very important, and if you're not doing this, you're kind of missing the point of the My Task view as well, is what we call the task auto promotion. Whenever you put something into the due later section, it's usually because the due date is in the future. But you want those tasks to rise up to the top of the list whenever the due date is on. You want them to move to the today section or move to the recently assigned section when the due date is up. Because you push them away, you want them to come back like a boomerang. That's called task auto promotion. In order to do this, it used to be automatic, but now you have to set it up yourself. You do it through a rule. That's the rule, I guess. It's not the right one. I'm just going to create one in the demo space that we have. It's the first one. Due date is approaching, move task to a certain section. If the task is due today, you want to move task to recently assigned or due today. Interesting note, most people will move this into today. I move things into recently assigned. I want to reevaluate if that task should be done today. I don't want to have my task control me. I want it to be the other way around. So I decide where that task should go. So it goes back into recently assigned, and then I decide where it goes. This specific rule, this specific trigger will trigger at midnight every day. It doesn't trigger when you change dates. So just keep that in mind. Feel free to use the board view. Feel free to use the calendar view. For the calendar view, just be aware just like the list view group by date. If you don't have a date, it doesn't show up, which is very dangerous in my opinion. You don't want to miss something just because it doesn't have a date. Last thing, you do have the ability to share your My Task view with colleagues, and we can see there at the top, My Task is shared with 2 colleagues. It only shares my sort, my filter, and my grouping. That's it. And then people accessing my task view will see things they are allowed to see. Adding people there at the top doesn't give them access to the entire list. That means they can't see private stuff. They can only see the right structure, the one I picked, and then they can see all the tasks they already have access to within that structure. My task, very important. Inbox, very important. Number 3, give love to your project templates. Spend time improving your templates. I'm going to show you an example right now. Let's say you work in marketing. Let's say you have a template to organize different events, different shows. The template is actually right there. You're going to use this template again and again and again. And every time you use the template, you want to make sure that the people who use the template, they get the biggest value possible. You want to make sure those people, they benefit from all the experience, all the collaborative intelligence of the team. The only way to do this is by making the template as good as possible. This is going to take time. It's never finished. You have to improve things every time you use them, but it's very important. Reason number 1, if someone leaves the team, they do not leave with their knowledge. The knowledge have been injected into the template, so they can leave and you keep the knowledge for your team. Reason number 2, someone joins the team, they're going to be using the template. The template will guide them every step of the way. You don't have to onboard them through very lengthy meetings and explain everything. It's all in the template. They just have to follow the template. That's why the template has to be as complete as possible. I'm not going to say as detailed as possible, because sometimes if it's too detailed, people do not like it, so you have to find the right balance, but really try to make that extra effort of making the template good. That means a couple of things. Putting an assignee if you have one by default. For example, in that case, Larry is always the one doing this specific step. Just pre-assign to Larry. You can use project roles as well. They are located there on the left-hand side behind myself. You can define roles and assign those roles to tasks. That means when you create a project from the template, Asana is going to ask you who will fill in those different roles, and you can put names for each one of those roles, saving a ton of time as well. Make sure you have all the right tasks, make sure they are named properly, make sure you have the right description for them, as much details as possible, but maybe not too many details either, because you don't want to make it too hard to update. So try to find the right balance. Try to use due dates as well if it applies. For example, in case of an event, you usually do everything from the event date, and then you schedule backwards from the event date. You can also decide to do it the other way around. You can work from the kickoff date all the way to the event date. Whatever you decide, you can use dates, relative dates right there, and you can pick a number of days either before or after the start date, or before or after the end date of the project, which is the one you're going to be giving when you use the template. When you use the template, you choose the name, you choose the date, and then you choose the roles. If you want to change the strategy backward or forward, this is where you go. You click there and you have the ability to choose backward or forward. Last thing about templates, actually no, I have a lot of stuff to say about the template. Put in place as many dependencies as you can. This example is not a good example. We only have one dependency right there. Most of the tasks in that project can't be done on day one. They should be blocked by something. They are not only blocked by the date, they should be blocked by something else, another task that has to be done. Make sure you have all the dependencies in place, because first, you want people to be notified when they can start working. Second, if you change a date, if you want to shift the project forward, it's easier when you have dependencies, because Asana is going to shift everything for you. Third, if you're working on a task, you need to know who you are impacting, either above you or below you. So it's important to define all those different dependencies. I know it takes a while, I know it's a lot of work sometimes, but there's really a lot of benefits to using dependencies, quite a lot. Make sure you decide on the right project members by default. It's right there at the top. And if you go into the settings, you can also decide who has the ability to update the template. So not everyone needs to be a member or a project template editor. and also make sure to pick a portfolio to use by default if you want to. Project templates, really important. That's the do number 3. Give them love, because they're going to give you love back when you need them the most. Do number 4, get help, either from a partner like us at i.DO Solutions Partner. We can help you deploy Asana properly, and or from a champion or a team of champion. You need someone internally that drives the change, looks at the roadmap, get involved in the Slack community, the forum. Someone has to follow that stuff and keep an eye out for new features and improve your usage overall. Make sure to turn to a partner. If you have like more than 10 members, it's good to have even a small deployment package is important to make sure you are on the right track from day one. And also remember, we can provide the licenses if you want to. We have some additional free benefits for you. Okay, those are the 4 do's. Let's look at the 4 don't. The first one is don't use subtasks too much. That's a complicated topic. So if you look at subtask, I'll show you an example. For example, this one, that's a very good example from our demo space. Actually, I'm going to do some cleanup. We won't edit that out. It's an example of the life as an Asana user. You just clean things up, you improve processes, don't shy away from improving those processes. And it's actually one of my point for later. There we have a few subtasks. When you're using subtasks, this is where you go. So a task has a different subtask, and those subtasks, they can have subtasks as well. You can go actually pretty deep. The problem is the deeper you go, the harder it is to follow. The subtasks, they have a lot of limitations. Those limitations, they tend to disappear as Asana slowly releases new features, but not everybody understands how to use subtasks properly. The ideal scenario is you have a task and the subtask list is basically a checklist of things you need to remember in order to use in order to complete that task. Ideally, you do not assign them, you don't have a date. I mean ideally, because that's the ideal scenario. I know there's lots of use cases where it makes sense to have subtasks. When you do use subtasks for this, try to not go deeper than one level, and also try to make sure your team knows how to use subtasks. That's very important. When using subtasks, keep in mind that when you're doing search, when you're doing dashboarding, they might be included, they might not be included. So you have to run a few tests to make sure whether or not they are included or not in the search or in the dashboard. That might completely change your results. Also, there's new features around roll-ups, so values being rolled up from subtasks as well. So that will help, but it will also add an additional layer of expertise needed to understand and use subtasks properly. I'm not saying subtasks are bad, I'm just saying they should be used cautiously, knowing exactly what you're doing. Don't be afraid to have too many projects. If you're shying away from having too many projects and instead just having tons of subtasks on your tasks, it's probably a bad idea. It's not that big of a problem to have many projects. We helped more than 500 clients using Asana. We have more than 500 projects, which is perfectly fine. It wouldn't be fine to have 500 tasks with tons of subtasks. Do not throw tasks at people. What I mean by that is doing things like PowerPoint. Lauren. That's basically throwing a task at someone. What you should do is, first, you don't assign right away. First, you prepare that task. So you go like update PowerPoint presentation. Then you go into the details, you go into the description as discussed in meeting XYZ. We need to do XYZ, ZYC, blah, blah, blah. Then you either assign directly to the person like this, or you can post a comment initially and then assign, or you can assign and post a comment. I usually like to add an additional comment explaining the context, unless that person expects my task and they know exactly what's coming their way. Otherwise, I usually put a nice comment in there saying, yeah, like, let me know if you need help, thanks. This goes a long way. Even if we use Asana, there's no reason to not be human and have that human touch when you're assigning tasks to someone. Also, in that specific case, there are two problems. The first one is the task was not added to a project, except my demo project, obviously, but that task should be added to the right project, a campaign project, a backlog, whatever you decide. Second thing is I did not put a date and did not communicate a priority. So usually within the comment, I would say something like priority low, or in like due date, if done by Monday, it is ideal. That's a good task. Having a date is also good, but the thing is, if I put this like Friday, you don't really know what that means for them, so you have to clarify in the comments. Is Friday a hard deadline? Is it a soft deadline? Can I push it? What am I depending on? Am I blocking someone else because there's no dependency right there? So you need to make sure that you give as much information as possible. Otherwise, you need to be ready for people to interpret things their way. That means Lauren might actually drop everything to do that by Friday, when in your mind Friday was a soft deadline and priority is low, so they shouldn't drop anything to do it. So make sure to explain everything, explain the whole context in the task, either in the description or in the comments. Do not expect to set up project and relax. So that's the example I shared with you earlier. Do not expect this project template to be perfect and never update it again. You will have to update it. Every single event you're going to create will require you to improve the template. You will need to get into meetings with your team to decide on improvements. You will have to debate on whether or not you have to go into more details or less details. That's a ton of stuff you have to discuss regarding process and workflows and templates. If you look at things like a simple HR workflow, there's currently 5 columns. Do you need more? Do you need less? Should you use the list view as the default view? Do you need automation? Do you need less automation? Do you need to remove the colors from the drop down? All of that stuff has to be improved over time. So don't expect to create this and sit back and relax. It's an ongoing work, and even the best ones in the world at Asana, they keep improving the system. Everybody does. So just keep that in mind. Do not expect to just sit back and relax. And the last one, but not least, do not expect Asana to do everything for you. Asana is not a CRM, it's not an ERP, it's not a marketing specific campaign management tool, it's not a timesheet tool either. It does all of the above in a very simple way. You can do a very simple CRM with Asana. You can do time tracking and timesheets with Asana in a simple way. You can manage campaigns, but it's not an ERP. It doesn't do everything an ERP does. And to be frank, I do not want Asana to do everything an ERP does, because otherwise that means Asana became too complex and has too many things to customize and set up. So Asana will stay quite simply on the surface. It will allow everybody to collaborate, but you might need specific tools for your team. For example, if you're a sales team, you might need Pipedrive. And then when you sign a client, you might have a handover creating a project into Asana. That might happen. You can start using Asana as a CRM, and then you can move into another tool outside of Asana. So do not expect Asana to do everything. All right, amazing. Thank you. So 4 do's. Inbox and my tasks, very, very important. Make sure to give love to your project templates. You're going to be using them again and again and again, and make sure to get help from a partner like us at i.DO, or from a champion, or a combination of both, which is the ideal situation. Do not use subtasks for everything. There are very specific use cases for subtasks. Do not throw tasks at people. Make sure they are properly set up and designed and named before assigning them. Do not expect to set up a project and just sit back and relax. It doesn't happen. You're going to have to improve things as you go, and do not expect Asana to do everything. Thank you for following. You can look at the description of the video to contact us if you need any help with your Asana setup. Bye.